Sure.
All right, just a look at the international news now. Republican Mike Pence and Democratic challenger Kamala Harris have squared off in the U.S. vice presidential debate in Salt Lake City, Utah, ahead of the next month's election. Harris attacked Pence over the Trump administration's handling of the coronavirus pandemic, while Pence defended the U.S. administration's efforts to battle the disease. Well, someone who was watching it very closely is our reporter out in New York, Sherwin Bryce-Pease. Good to chat to you again, Sherwin. A much more civil debate, I have to say, than that was between the presidential candidates.
I'm always going to say, if South Africans didn't wake up at 3 a.m. to watch the debate, Leanne, you'll do fine just watching the reruns, right?
Yeah.
I don't think anyone really landed any blows. One of the questions I've been getting throughout this period is, will either candidate be able to move the needle in any direction? And my argument was that the Trump campaign has been lagging here. So it was for Mike Pence, really, who had the larger mountain to scale today, if you will. And unfortunately, none of them really did that. It was a more civil debate. The moderator had much more control. And candidates actually listened to their opposition person make their point. There might have been some interjection, as would happen in any vice presidential debate or any debate of this nature in politics. But really a very cordial, above-board affair. And in terms of moving the race in any different direction, it's still advantage Biden-Harris here.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it and, you know, it's such a difficult time, obviously, for the Republican campaign. We are seeing what's happening to Trump. Obviously, the big story was how the Trump administration had, of course, handled and is still handling the coronavirus pandemic with in excess of 200,000 lives being lost. That took, obviously, a lot of the time, and that was one of the big issues. Perhaps you want to elaborate more, and especially in the background with Trump having coronavirus now and the way he's been handling it.
True, so much going on in terms of coronavirus, not just the president, but some 30-plus staff we find out today. In terms of the contact tracing that is going around, that initial outbreak, 30 people associated with the White House, work at the White House. Then you have people at the Pentagon that have been to the White House. You have Republican senators that have been to the White House, campaign staff that have been to the White House and now are testing positive for COVID-19. But I think the big headline out of that discussion was Kamala Harris calling this the greatest failure in American history in terms of how the administration has handled this. Mike Pence tried to defend his administration's response here, and remember, he is also the leader of the president or the White House coronavirus task force. So he's well versed in the administration's response to the pandemic. He said American people deserve credit for the sacrifices they made during COVID-19. Trump administration has confidence in the American people to take the information we give them and to put it into practice. President Trump trusts American people to make decisions about their health. We are about freedom and respect for the American people, and this is where Kamala Harris pounced. She says that respecting American people means telling American people the truth. She called it the ineptitude of the administration, unwilling to speak truth to the American people. She was referencing intelligence briefings to the White House, to the executive office as early as January 28th, and them really only coming to the table in terms of briefing the American public sometime in March. And she talked about that, the courage in leadership, Leanne, is to tell them what they might not want to hear. And so I think tomorrow you'll see the headline about Kamala Harris really giving them stick on this. But of course, the calm tenor, demeanor of Mike Pence doesn't get rattled by this much. But I think in terms of the coronavirus response in the United States, it's pretty much ingrained into the electorate. Now, people know what's up here. 210,000 Americans have died since the virus appeared here in late January. Just looking at the latest figures, Leanne, the latest figures tell us that 48,700 Americans were infected in the last 24 hours, 932 deaths in the last 24 hours. Compare that to your shock of the 125 or whatever the number was of deaths in South Africa over the last 24 hours, and you see a stark difference there.
Yeah, indeed, and that's been the battle in the US, and it's a huge reality, and I imagine a big cloud hanging over the Republicans. Let's quickly look at other issues that were brought up, and I mean, for you, what came out, obviously the tax issue was something that was also discussed, and this is something where Kamala Harris came in. So talk to us about that.
I'll give you a quick run through. So I talked about COVID-19. Kamala Harris received a question about whether she would trust a vaccine were to come out, before the end of the year. And there's been the politicization of the, in terms of this warp speed initiative under the Trump administration, where they are pushing the FDA to approve a vaccine before the election. And of course, the experts who give us the sort of the medical and scientific timeline for the efficacy and safety tests to have been completed tell us not before the election, after the election, but probably only early next year. She said she would not trust Trump on a vaccine, but she would trust the safety of a vaccine if the scientists said so. And this is where Mike Pence really jumped all over her response, to asking her not to politicize the vaccine. And this was just like the height of hypocrisy, just given what we've seen over the last number of months in terms of, science telling us one thing and the administration another. He also talked about China being to blame for the coronavirus. The WHO, the World Health Organization, didn't play it straight, he said. We will hold China accountable for what they did to America. Harris weighed in that the Trump administration's strategy on China, their trade war against China, has cost American jobs. They also sparred about the Supreme Court. You'll know that there is a process underway in the Senate right now to confirm a replacement for liberal justice, the late liberal Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Trump's nominee is Amy Coney Barrett, a conservative. And Pence was talking about how he hopes that Democratic senators will not attack her Christian faith. I could not be more enthusiastic to get her confirmed. And they touched also about criminal justice. There was a question about Breonna Taylor and the subsequent attorney general and the grand jury decision not to really indict any of those officers for her directly involved in her death, in her killing. Harris said she doesn't think that justice was done. Pence, of course, breaking with that, saying his heart breaks for her family, but they trust the justice system. So just a snapshot of some of the issues. There was also questions about climate change. Mike Pence saying that President Donald Trump will always follow the science, Leanne.
Well, okay. And then the final question to you, and very quickly, the two things I think that I'm hearing and standing out from this particular debate was, number one, Kamala Harris. I think there are going to be T-shirts printed all over saying, "I'm speaking," because that was her response every time Mike Pence tried to interrupt her. She stood her ground. "I'm speaking." That's going to be the new T-shirt and slogan. And I think a lot of people are going to like that. But the fly, Sherwin, that unfortunately has stolen the limelight. The fly sitting on Mike Pence's head. What's going on? Are we just looking for things?
Here's breaking news for you on the fly, Leanne. There is already a story in the New York Times about how this fly spent 2 minutes on the top of Mike Pence's white-gray hair. So, and no one was aware of it. I noticed it when people started commenting about it on social media. But this fly has its own story in the New York Times. There's your headline. There's your takeaway for the debate. Good morning, South Africa.
Thank you, Sherwin. Thank you so much. Can you believe it? After all that, the biggest story to come out of the debate was a fly sitting on Mike Pence's head for over 2 minutes. Goodness me. All right, let's look at the market indicator.